Hello, everybody. My name is Aaron, and we are doing Ansible Toronto for March 2021. It's our virtual meetup, and let's kick things off. What we're going to do is go over part of our agenda, and then we're going to introduce everyone who's going to chat, and then we'll start off with our updates and move into everyone else's talks and demos. So right now, let me just bring everyone in so everyone can say hi. So we have Aurora, Mohsin, and Patrick. Excellent. So we've got two major topics for today. Mohsin and Aurora are working on Ansible for micro-k8s, and Patrick's going to be talking about the future of Ansible because, as you'll see from the sort of the community updates, there's a whole bunch of stuff that may or may not be changing. And I'll change that from a may or may not to absolutely a little bit later. But for now, everyone has said hi, and let's move on to really just the next thing in sequence of events. It's been a little while since we've done this, so I feel rusty, but it'll be fantastic by the time we're done. All right, so everyone just hang tight, and I'll pull you back in when it's your turn, okay? All right. So as for updates, well, before we dive into that, at least I want to say hello to everybody, whether you're new or you're a veteran of coming to the meetup. Back before COVID, we did this in person, and it was great to see everybody in person, and we haven't done that for quite a while. But nonetheless, it's great to have everyone join us if you're joining us today. Feel free to drop a message in the YouTube live chat if you want us to call out whatever city you're in or such and so forth. We can say hello. Other than that, I just would like to say that we should probably send a thanks to Red Hat, StreamYard, YouTube, and Arctiq for helping us make this event possible. And I'd like to also thank our speakers who you just met for stepping up for today. Talking in front of an unknown quantity of audience is always going to be a little bit stressful for some people. So it's great to have guests who come in. We're going to keep most of our Q&A for the end. So if you have questions, please drop them into chat. And what we'll do is we'll pull them out and present them to the speakers near the end. Or if there's something that seems more pertinent to right immediately after their chat, we'll probably try to fit it in. We're not going to be too stringent about that kind of thing. And any kind of other Q&A or contact with us, feel free to go through the YouTube chat. And there should be, you should be able to find on the arctic.ca website every other way you can get in touch with us. So moving on, who am I? You know who I am. Let's move onwards. So notables, I do this every time. We go through the notable changes and a quick community update about Ansible. So I had a quick look at the Ansible community GitHub repo recently, and you'll see that as of now, or just a matter of days ago, we go from 2.10 to two more folders in there called 3 and 4. So I'm not going to ruin really Patrick's fire here, but this is going to look weird for everyone who's looked at this repo before and seen either branches for each individual 2.x version, or they've seen folders for something else. So things are afoot. I'm not entirely sure what they are, but we will find out today, I assure you. Other things that are worth noting, at least as of Ansible 2.10, is that there's been mainly bug fixes and security fixes. There are some interesting collection names that had changes and entries in the release notes. Cisco, Ansible Windows, Juniper, Amazon, Arista, Vios, Pure Storage, VMware, Postgres, ServiceNow. A number of those have had changes, updates, and you'll see that in the span of release notes from 2.9 through 2.10.7, a lot of collection movement and renaming is happening. And this is likely due to a whole bunch of changes involving making the Ansible collections more consumable sort of universally across both Ansible community as well as the Ansible enterprise offerings. So it's good to see consistency. It's good to see lots of security fixes and seeing, the usual set of deprecations and dependencies being handled, where if you're concerned about a particular collection or module or feature you've been using in Ansible, it'd be probably a really good idea to jump in, check the release notes for whatever versions you're moving to, and see what you might have to make some compromises for or anticipate some fixes for in later versions. Some other notables that we're seeing, that if you're using AWX or Tower, you're going to see a few of these things come across your way. So I guess first and foremost, it's obvious now Red Hat is bundling all the verbiage of Ansible Tower into what they're calling Ansible Automation Platform. So everyone who's still familiar with Tower, you can keep using Tower as you have been, but everything related to sort of its branding has been put under the Ansible Automation Platform guys right now. So moving on to everything in Tower, sort of, I kind of take a wide view of the releases from the last time we talked about it. So in this case, 3.7x to current version, which is 3.8. I think 2. They've made a few changes that and I've picked out just a few that might be worth looking at for a few people. So for example, they've removed support for the primary Galaxy username and password settings, and you'll need to move over to using API tokens for accessing Ansible Galaxy or Automation Hub as content providers. Another one that's kind of interesting to pull out is that they removed Memcached as a caching service for Tower. I'm curious what might have gone in as a replacement. For anyone who still uses CloudForms, they've removed support for CloudForms as an inventory source and credential type. So plugging Tower into CloudForms is evidently going away. And something that is probably more obvious for everyone who's aware of what's going on around CentOS lately is that they've deprecated CentOS as well as RHEL 7 as a supported OS for Tower nodes. And in a future release, they'll fully remove it. So if you're planning on deploying Tower or AWX soon, you're going to want to be aiming for a RHEL 8 or an equivalent Enterprise Linux 8. And Automation Hub as a content provider is a new thing. For Tower 3.7 to current as well, some other notables include things like the added ability to use an OAuth token for as an Ansible Tower credential. This is great for people using cloud where OAuth 2 is far more common. We've got an update to Tower where they utilize a newer version of an application to do certificate auto discovery of the system certificate store. So this is interesting if you've got certificate handling or any PKI in your playbooks. Updated the minimum system required Ansible version to 2.9. So if you're doing Tower 3.7 through 3.8, expect that the minimum Ansible version will be 2.9. And then a particular endpoint, an API endpoint, was deprecated, which they're going to remove in a future release. So if you happen to use the job events endpoint, you'll need to find another way to go about that. And then, of course, a plethora of performance and bug regression fixes, primarily in the 3.8.x area, and a number of CVEs and security fixes along the way. So I guess I'll add one more quick thing, which I always kind of forget to mention as the chat starts to come in, is there's like a 7 to 10 second delay between what we say when you hear it. And I think the same thing happens with the opposite direction. So when you put something in the chat, we might not see it for another 7 seconds. So a quick sort of housekeeping thing there. But up next, we've covered off the updates. Up next, we've got Aurora and Mohsin from Arctiq. They're going to be talking about Ansible for microcates. So let me bring them in here and they can get started. Aurora, Mohsin, it's all you now.
Thank you, Aaron. Hi, everyone. My name is Aurora, and today Mohsin and I will be talking about Ansible microcates, and we also call it the edge of Kubernetes. First of all, a quick introduction of ourselves. My name is Aurora. I'm a consultant from Arctiq, and I've been focusing on deploying Kubernetes platforms for all kinds of customers, and also helping them to set up and operationalize their Kubernetes platform. Mohsin?
Hi everyone, my name is Mohsin Raza, and I'm working as a consultant for Arctiq. My focus areas are cloud automation using Ansible and Terraform and everything Kubernetes.
Awesome. So for today's event, I will be presenting a few slides trying to discuss what we are achieving using Ansible and from a perspective for Kubernetes. And Mohsin has an awesome demo for you guys right after my presentation. All right. So first off, for those who haven't heard too much or haven't worked with Kubernetes before, this is just a quick introduction for Kubernetes. It's an open source system for automating deployment, scaling, and management of containerized applications. There are a lot of certified distributions for Kubernetes, as I listed here. This is the official document from Kubernetes. And as you can see, there are a lot of familiar icons, including AWS, Red Hat OpenShift, and also micro-K8s, which we'll be talking about later on today. And as a reference, I also put here a Kubernetes cluster from the architecture perspective. So there will be different nodes. In our case, it can be VMs, it can be physical nodes, it can be some resources in the cloud as well. And those nodes will be providing the compute for the Kubernetes cluster. All right, so we talked about a node, and a very popular deployment for Kubernetes is on bare metal. So there are a lot of cases where, for example, you're just trying out Kubernetes, you only have a few VMs that's available to you, and you do not really have the public cloud available yet. There are some solutions for bare metal Kubernetes distributions. So there will be a few VMs that you have access to. You can probably SSH into those VMs as a person. And there are a lot of deployment, some configurations you can do on those VMs so that they can form a Kubernetes cluster. I'm sure this solution looks very familiar with a lot of you in the audience, since you are probably the person here SSH into VMs. And very luckily, we do have an awesome solution to automate it. That's with Ansible. So with Ansible, instead of you SSH into those VMs or into those compute resources, you can definitely use Ansible playbooks or some other Ansible tools to do the deployment so that Kubernetes will be deployed on those bare metal. And this method is applied very largely in different distributions. I think the most popular one is for OpenShift. So actually, when you are deploying OpenShift, using the tools underneath it, it's probably Ansible. And there are a lot of open source resources as well for other Kubernetes distributions as well. And in our talk today, we will be focusing on one of the Kubernetes distribution, which is called micro-K8s. And we are deploying it with the same method I'm showing here. So we do have some VMs available to deploy micro-K8s, and we are using Ansible to automate the whole process. All right. So a little bit about micro-K8s. It is a certified distribution of Kubernetes, and it's really focusing on the low ops, minimal production Kubernetes. And since it's very lightweight compared to some other Kubernetes distributions, it is a popular choice for developers, for workstations, and a lot of edge use cases are using micro-K8s as the Kubernetes distribution. And a quote from Kelsey Hightower: Canonical might have assembled the easiest way to provision a single node Kubernetes cluster. So if you're out there trying to learn about Kubernetes and you only have a very limited resource, maybe micro-K8s can be a good choice for you to try it out. And also, there will be enterprise support if you're looking for large deployment or using it in production for your environment. All right, so here is the sample architecture of micro-K8s. This is exactly what Mohsin is going to deploy using Ansible. So here we have 3 different VMs. In our case, we're using Google Cloud as a resource. So these are all GCE compute engines. And on those VMs, we'll be deploying Snap and deploying micro-K8s using Snap. There are a few add-ons as well we'll be deploying, including the Ingress load balancer, which is MeadowLB. And we are also enabling a high availability architecture. Basically, we do have an etcd data store, and this will be distributed across all the VMs. All right. So moving on to the Ansible playbook, we're going to use, here is the workflow that Mohsin has deployed using the Ansible playbook. First of all, we will have a jump server, including all the inventory and SSH keys to log in to those VMs. We'll be installing some prerequisites there. And after that, we'll be deploying micro-K8s on those VMs and enable high availability, and also enable some add-ons to the micro-K8s cluster. So these are all part of Ansible role, which we called deploy micro-K8s. And the reason we're doing that, I'll be explaining that in a little bit. We also add some logics to it as well, just in case. Sometimes micro-K8 status might fail for some reason, so we'll need to remove micro-K8 and redeploy it to make sure everything goes through. And of course, we do have a limit here in terms of how many times we can try to deploy and remove. And after the micro-K8 cluster is available to us, we will use another Ansible role to deploy a sample application. Here, we are only deploying a very simple Hello app to demonstrate the capability of Ansible when it's managing Kubernetes. There are a few benefits I do want to point out. First one is scalability. So with Ansible Playbook, we can do some really large rollouts, especially for edge use cases. Imagine if you have 50 different edge locations and you do want to deploy micro-K8s or any other Kubernetes distributions. It's inevitable to use some kind of automation tools, and Ansible, I believe, is a very good choice for you. Since it is very scalable, you can basically just add your edge locations, add those IP ranges and necessary information into there, and then you can reuse your Ansible playbooks and Ansible roles to do the exact same thing for different edge locations. Another good thing for this Ansible playbook flow is modular. So when we were designing the Ansible playbook, one of the requirements is it will be like a Lego piece. You can plug what you want to do into the Ansible playbook without too much disruptions and too much recode. So here we do have a specific Ansible role for deploy micro-K8s, and we can use it for deployment. And we can later on add more Ansible roles into our playbook flow so that it can achieve whatever you want to achieve in your case. Another very important benefit I want to point out is it's very lightweight. No matter if you're considering the micro-K8s cluster itself, or if you're considering the deployment steps and the deployment tools to be used here. So in our case, the only thing we really need is an Ansible Bastion host, and that's all. There is no more plugins, no more agent we need on the VMs. Everything is going through Ansible and is totally configurable. And after the deployment, you can feel free to decommission your Ansible Bastion host or jump box if needed. So in general, it's very lightweight when you are considering some edge location resource limitations there. All right, so these are the overviews of Ansible for microcades, and we will move on to the demo. Mohsin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Aurora. So let me share my screen. So for this demo, I'm going to show you how we can deploy multiple microcades cluster using Ansible. So for this demo, and I'm using Google Cloud Platform to simulate the environment. So consider I'm using 3 different edge sites for this kind of deployment. So think of a scenario where you have a large enterprise having multiple locations, edge sites where they want to deploy the Kubernetes. So we are going to use that, and for that I've selected 3 regions inside the GCP: US East 4A, which is Ashburn, and then Northeast Montreal, and US West 3 Salt Lake City. So I'll be deploying 3 different microcades cluster in these 3 environments using Ansible. So and I have already spin up some of the machines. So for each cluster, I'll be using 4 nodes for the microcades, so that it will be running in an HA environment for high availability. And there will be a Bastion host, which we will use in order to deploy the microcades via Ansible. So everything will be done through this Ansible Bastion host. So, and I can click on one of the instance and to show you that these are all very lightweight, minimal machine types, and one standard one with 1 CPU and 3.75 GB memory. But you can go much lower than that as well. There are some already deployments of microcades on Raspberry Pis as well. So it's pretty much, it can run easily on a very lean kind of hardware. So before going into much details, let me quickly kick off my playbook so that while it's running, I can go into the details. So I'm running this in the Montreal, and for here, I'm running my playbook for Ashburn. And here I'm running the playbook for the 3rd cluster, which is in Salt Lake. So now let's see the code details. So this is my playbook, and the inventory I have organized in this structure. So my inventory consists of 3 locations, which are Ashburn, Montreal, and Salt Lake. And each location has a group vars directory where I have the group variables defined.
Hey, Mohsin, could you give us a zoom in on that?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe 1 or 2 levels should be enough.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
And just to be clear, was that the same Bastion running Ansible for 3 different clusters all at the same time, right?
Yes, on 3 different clusters, like 3 different Bastion hosts. Yeah, I will show you the details. Just give me 1 second. I have opened a wrong location.
Okay.
All right. So my inventory is organized in this structure. I have 3 sites, and I can see this. All right, let's do this through the command line. So this is the structure of my inventory. I have organized in this kind of structure where I have 3 sites, Ashburn, Montreal, and Salt Lake. And I'm using these YAML. I'm defining my variables inside these 2 files in each group vars directory, local.yaml. The local.yaml file contains the variables which will be specific to the environment, and all.yaml, you can see it's basically a symbolic link which is pointing to the this YAML file, which will be containing all the variables which will go across the environments. So if you define any variable inside local.yaml, it will be specific and it will have more priority, and the second priority will go to the all.yaml. So this is kind of a structure which will help you if you have multiple environments and you want to organize your inventory in this kind of way. So you can do it in this way. So let me quickly show you. So, for example, so this is my the variables that I'm using for my playbook, and so I have defined the Ansible user, the private key file that I'm using, the Kubernetes version, whatever Kubernetes version I'm going to use. So for the microkits, and metalLB is the load balancer that we are going to use inside the Kubernetes for exposing our workloads outside the cluster. So this is the IP, because metalLB requires a IP range to be defined. So I'm defining through this variable, and the work dir, which we are going to use to store different files. All right. So, and if I go to the Montreal group first, here you can see that I have defined Kubernetes version here for Montreal. I'm changed it to 1.20. So although by default the Kubernetes version in the all.yaml is defined to 1.19, so for Montreal it will be 1.20. So you can change the variable specific to your environment inside the local YAML. So for the playbook, I'm using this main.yaml. So this is my main playbook that I'm running here in 3 sites, and you can see I'm using 2 roles, which is one is microkits and the other one is hello app. So let's see if these roles. So first one is the microkits. This is my main.yaml, and it's using this is my microkits.yaml. So in this playbook, I'm basically first of all setting the jump host, because I'm using the bastion host to deploy microkits on each 3 sites. So everything will be run through this bastion host. That's why I'm setting Ansible SSH common arguments for setting up the proxy command, so that everything is run via this bastion host. So after that, I'm installing kubectl on the bastion host, so that we can access our microkits cluster from the bastion host, and we can run kubectl commands from the bastion host. So, and after that, I'm checking if microkits is already installed. So if it's not installed, then we are going to install the microkits. So for installing microkits, it's very simple. You can do it through snap module, and you can just provide the version name, whatever Kubernetes version you want to use. And so Kubernetes, Canonical has made it very simple to install microkits if snap is available on the distribution. So once the microkits is installed and it's ready, then after that we enable the HA. So for enabling HA, we have to generate the first a token for each node. So I'm doing that here. So you can see I'm adding each nodes here in this task, and then this is the logic to basically generate the tokens and then use that token for each node and add it to the cluster, so that they can form in high availability cluster. So once that is done, then we verify the microkit status through this command. And once the status is verified, then after that, I create the .cube directory through this task. So .cube directory we created for storing our kube config on the bastion node so that we can run any kubectl command from the bastion. So after that, I am generating the kube config. This is the command to generate the kube config. I'm storing it at a temporary location and then copying it to the bastion host. So I'm fetching, this task will fetch the kube config from the primary node and it will copy it to the bastion host, the second task. Once that is done, then we enable some of the, you can say the plugins. MicroKits has support of different plugins. So you can install different Kubernetes applications on your cluster using those plugins, and it's very simple. So you can, for example, if you want core DNS, then you can just simply do MicroKits enable DNS to enable core DNS. And for storage, I'm enabling storage as well to use as host path as the storage on my clusters. And then I'm enabling MetalLB so that I can use a load balancer, which this is MetalLB is the inside the Kubernetes load balancer. So once you deploy your workloads, you can expose your services out of the cluster. So this is what the playbook looks like. So the playbook has finished. You can see here the Montreal server is deployed. So this is the IP of the Montreal server. I will access it just to verify that everything is done.
That's a pretty beefy keyboard you're working on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's too loud. So here I can simply run because kubeconfig is already copied by the playbook here, so I can directly run the kubectl commands here. I can do kubectl get nodes, and you can see we can see the 4 nodes for the Montreal. And the version you can see it's 1.20 because we have specifically defined it only for the Montreal side. For the rest of the clusters, you will see that it will be 1.19.
And just a quick one for clarity, these clusters are independent, right? They're not interconnected in any way.
No, they are not interconnected. They are in 3 different regions, which inside different VPCs.
Excellent, yeah.
Yeah. So I can now get the namespaces here, and I can see. So there's another role that I forgot to mention here, which is I'm using a Hello app, and I'm using this role to deploy a Hello app application. It's a very simple role, and you can see it's just simply I have a deployment.yaml which basically using deploying a Hello app and creating a load balancer service for that app. So I'm doing that through this role. So I can see that the Hello app service is already deployed by the role via playbook, and I can now check the resources inside this and namespace. So I can see that the Hello app is deployed and it's running. The 3 pods are running because it's a deployment, and there were 3 replicas. And I have created a load balancer type service. So the MetalLB has assigned the external IP, which is from the range that we have defined inside our playbook, and I can access my service to this IP. So you can see I can access the service and it's available. So coming to the Ashburn, I can quickly verify. So again, I'm using the Ashburn Bastion host to access the. Sorry, I forgot to add a HI. Here You can again do kubectl get nodes, and you can see we have 4 nodes available, and the version is 1.19 because we haven't defined a specific version. So it's taking the standard one from the all.yaml, and we can see the same. It will have the same namespace, the same hello app as well. So we can see that we can easily deploy microcates on multiple clusters inside using the Ansible playbook, and you can do a mass deployment of lightweight edge Kubernetes through this way. So here we had some errors on Salt Lake. So let me try to verify if the cluster is deployed. I'm using the bastion host of the Salt Lake, and here I can. Okay, so it's deployed, and okay, so I can get the namespaces as well. Let me check the hello app, and I have the hello app also running here as well, and I can curl it just to verify. So you can see that we have deployed 3 different microcade cluster in 3 different locations. They can be bare metal. For this demo, I have used GCP, but obviously, if you are doing some real world in a deployment in a real world scenario, then there will be maybe bare metal nodes running on VMware or any kind of virtualization or hypervisor. But you can do deployment through Ansible and do mass deployment in this way. And we have also demonstrated that we can do the app deployment on Kubernetes using Ansible playbook as well. So I think and one thing for this demo that I have done backend is that because I'm running on GCP, for this kind of scenario. So I have set up VXLAN overlay as well, because layer 2 network is not available on these cloud platforms. So for Metal LB, we required the layer 2 network connectivity for our nodes. So I have used a VXLAN overlay. So that's why it's working. So if you're going to test it later on, so you have to consider that in mind, because I have a VXLAN overlay running. But if you're using like bare metal nodes or any virtualization, so if you have layer 2 connectivity available, then you don't need that. All right, so this is it from my side. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Very good. So I guess what I see there is just the ability to put out a lot of Kubernetes clusters very easily with Ansible. I see this as the thing where you could probably set up people's lab clusters if they wanted to do that kind of thing. I was just curious, what is the smallest size cluster you can deploy with microcates?
Yeah, you can deploy even a single node cluster, but obviously it will not be highly available.
Right.
Yeah, but you can do like single node. Yeah. Only one machine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's impressive. Thank you very much again. That was incredible. And as if we thought, that Ansible and Kubernetes was gone because of OpenShift 3 going away and being replaced by OpenShift 4. It's not, because you can still use Ansible to make Kubernetes happen. It's great. It's still a good story, especially now that this whole thing about edge compute becomes a little more popular. So it definitely makes sense that it's something that we happen to be doing. So yeah, anyone who has any questions, please drop them into chat. We'll pull them into the Q&A session at the end. That was great. I'm going to drop you guys out, but stay on for Q&A later, and I'm going to bring in Patrick. Patrick, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing, Aaron?
Doing really good. All right. Here is Patrick talking about future of Ansible.
Thanks very much. Yeah, and thanks for coming to listen to me. So those who don't know me, my name is Patrick Toal. I'm a solution architect with Red Hat. Spent a number of years at Cisco prior to being here. So I have a networking background as much as a system admin background. So I like to talk about automating all the things, not just my systems. But today what I'm here to talk to you about is some of the stuff that's going on in Ansible land. I know not everybody has time to stay up to date on all the latest changes, and so I thought I'd try and give you a short kind of overview of where things have been going and where they have gone and where they're going from here on. I'm just going to let you know right up front that there's a lot of stuff I'm not going to say because there's a big event coming up very soon that I'd like you all to attend called Red Hat Summit, where Red Hat will be announcing a lot of things and doing some demos of some of the stuff I'm talking about. So being a Red Hatter, I'm not allowed to scoop Red Hat, so I'll try not to do that. So just to give you a quick history, where did we come from? What's been going on? I want to start at the beginning. If anybody's ever heard me present or anybody present on Ansible, they've probably seen this slide, which is, what is the core fundamental principles of Ansible? What did the founders, if you will, want to achieve? And powerful, agentless, and simple. Agentless has actually turned out to be fairly easy, not easy, but fairly easy in compared to the other two. Powerful and simple, because powerful and simple are often at odds with each other. How do I make something really powerful and very flexible, and how can I use it in lots of different ways, but then also not, kill myself with the complexity that I've created? And so what I've seen, and this is my view on this, what I've seen in the last year around Ansible is really kind of a struggle to make sure that we've got a balance between both of those sides. And I saw that Mr. Geerling was watching the stream. He's been a great proponent for making sure that we're as we go forward, we're not kind of taking away the ability for people to get started with Ansible easily, to manage their playbooks, etc. Right? So it's this is really what we're trying to accomplish, is this balancing act over the last year. If you look at where Ansible has come from, I mean, Ansible 2.0, there were 500 modules. And, for those who aren't familiar, I mean, Ansible plus the modules were all part of the big Ansible/Ansible project on GitHub, right? So when we got to 3,000 modules, that meant that everybody who owned a module and wanted to make a change to anything in one of their modules had to, go through the Ansible release process, which also meant that there was just a never-ending sea of issues and patches and so forth going into the project. So it was unsustainable. Looking forward to Ansible 2.9, there are 3,700 modules in that. And in the latest release of Ansible, it's ridiculous. I can't even remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's like 4,000 or 5,000 modules now. So obviously that was not sustainable. So the other thing that went on that we've noticed that's changed over time, in addition to the module growth, is who's using and consuming Ansible. It used to be that I would just pick up Ansible as a sysadmin and go, hey, this makes my life easier. I'm going to start using this. And so I would write my playbooks. I would run my playbooks, and a bunch of other people in my team might use them. But then what started happening was, this little thing called Ansible, this tool, started spreading out into other parts of the organization, right? It started off being a sysadmin tool, went into networking and Windows. The security teams are using it now. And not only that, there are different people consuming the content, right? So you have people who are writing the playbooks, who may be a domain specialist, but then you have somebody else that's using it, right? So an end user may be executing it from the AWX or Tower survey form, or they might be running it out of a ServiceNow ticket request, so they don't even see what's going on, right? So there's, we've got this whole other category of users that are now consuming that content, don't know anything about writing playbooks. And then to get to that scale, we also have people who are operating it now. Now we have whole teams that are operating the automation infrastructure, right? They're deploying Tower, they're deploying, different versions of Python and Ansible and plugins, and I'll get there in a minute. But so now we have all of these different groups of people that are all kind of needing to be able to do their piece of the automation story. And, how do we make it so that everybody can do their bit and it doesn't, again, burden them with complexity? So those are the two things that we've seen. And as we go across and, as an organization starts to adopt Ansible automation across multiple disciplines, multiple teams working together, multiple nodes being managed, multiple workflows being built across, networking and systems and Windows. How do you then manage to make sure that everybody can participate? And that's the other thing, right? This is the drum I've been beating lately is automation should be participatory, right? It shouldn't be just a small enclave of automation gurus with long white beards and wizard staffs making the automation for people. Everybody should be able to participate in it. So so this is, part of the challenge that we're trying to deal with. And then once we get to that scale, the other thing that we're trying to balance in all of this power and simplicity is, now this is kind of important to my business. How do I make sure that I can adopt DevOps practices or DevSecOps practices or GitOps practices? How can I make sure that I can manage this automation infrastructure, that I can reliably reproduce and test the automations that I'm building? And the forever problem is, how do I maintain it and make sure that I can upgrade from version to version without breaking things, right? So these are all of the things that we've been trying to balance in the community and as Red Hat, and making sure that we don't take away the simplicity, because it's a fundamental thing about how why Ansible works the way it does. Quite frankly, the simplicity is why people use Ansible to get started. And I think any good technology should be simple to start using, but then you should be able to level up fairly easily as well. And so the two things that have really been going on in the last year are on the Ansible, what used to be called Engine. So if you're familiar with Engine, right, that's the Ansible command line, Ansible-playbook and run my thing, and then Tower or AWX, right? So both of those have been undergoing a lot of changes, and they've been more focused on kind of structural changes, what I'll call, rather than facade, or not facade, but usability and front user. So we've gone through a lot of the infrastructure changes over last year, and what I see going forward is that now we're starting to actually make it so that we're kind of focusing on the experience for the different personas. So again, going back, talking about Engine for a minute, there was this great migration, right? And for those of you who lived through it, like, wait, hey, what's going on with all of this collections stuff, right? And collections were about tearing apart that big blob, that monolithic blob of code that was Ansible, and realizing that people who were writing modules and contributing content into the Ansible functionality, they needed to be able to have their own iteration, their own development lifecycle that was independent of the Ansible lifecycle. And so in the last couple of years, the Ansible community has been working on pulling apart what we call the core functionality from all of the contributed content, right? So what that gave us is, from Ansible 2.9 to 2.10 is this kind of transitionary thing, right? And so 2.10, if you did a few months ago, if you did a pip install Ansible and you got 2.10 from the community, right? That was never 2.10 was never supported by Red Hat. If you're a Red Hat customer, for example, we locked on 2.9 because 2.10 was always this release where it was going to be a little bit clunky, because we were breaking apart the collections. What you're going to see in a minute is how that's kind of evolving into Ansible, the package, and Ansible, the core, and then all the community stuff. But 2.9 to 2.10, if you're running Ansible in production on a Red Hat infrastructure, you want to be running on 2.9. If you were in the community and you were getting used to the changes, you probably were updating to 2.10. And I had a lot of people ask me, hey, I've upgraded to 2.10. What's going on? I mean, how come it's not in the Red Hat repos and stuff? And so it was a little confusing. So let me talk a minute about what that means for Ansible Core, right? So what is Core? I've talked about that. Core is the Ansible CLI, right? So Ansible Playbook, Ansible Doc, those are still there. That's part of Core. The language itself, right? The YAML DSL that makes up the Playbook language, that's part of Core. The framework, right? So the pluggability with collections, Automation Hub, Galaxy, all of that stuff. And then, the basic functions, right? Like Jinja, templating, loops, and all of that stuff. So all of that is core, right? You notice that I haven't said anything about modules that talk to networking equipment, or even modules that talk to systems. A lot of that stuff, that's not considered core. Some of it is, but a lot of it isn't. So where does that take us? So we have 3.0, and actually 3.1 was recently released. 3.0 is the community distribution, or actually it's called the Ansible Community Package, I believe. It's had a number of different names, so please don't shoot me if I've got that wrong or if it changes tomorrow. But I think it's called the Ansible Community Package. 3.0 was released, I think, back in February. We're at 3.1. I'm going to, Aaron, we're going to have to chat about how we distribute these links, because there's some links in these slides that I want people to have. So we'll make sure we get you those, because everything here is linked. 3.0, 3.1.
We should be able to drop them into the chat at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll do that. But
Mhm.
so these are all public links. There have been a lot of blog posts on the Ansible.com blog, so please visit that if you haven't seen all of this up-to-date stuff. And so the Ansible Community Package. Let me see if my no, it's the next slide. So so the Ansible Community Package. I'm going to skip forward. Actually, my flow is not good here. The Ansible Community Package is a combination of the core that I just talked about and the community collections, right? And so what you're going to see is we broke apart Ansible into core and the community collections, and there's lots of those, hundreds of them. And then every once in a while, what will happen is the community will rebuild and repackage core with a whole bunch of the community collections, right? So I think the latest one is got 4,000 or 5,000 modules in it, right? So when you do a pip install Ansible today, you'll get, actually I think it was 3.1 was the one I just got. And it will be like it was in the past, right? Again, this is about keeping it simple. So I can still go to the command line, I can still do pip install Ansible, and it will give me Ansible, whatever it is, with all my modules. And in fact, you know what? I'm gonna go off book here, and I'm just gonna show you. Oops, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm just gonna show you what that looks like, just to show that I'm not a liar. Ansible. I'm going to activate a meetup.
We don't think you're a liar, Patrick. Jeez.
Well, sometimes people, question. So I've just created a new Python virtual environment. I'm going to do pip install Ansible, not builder. I'm giving you a heads up there. And you can see here, right? It's cached because I installed it earlier, but I'm getting Ansible 3.1.0, which includes Ansible base or core, whatever the name is for it today. And then, it's all of the dependencies, obviously, like YAML and Jinja and so forth. So when it's done, which shouldn't be too long, I can do, not pip, I can do Ansible-doc-L pipe to WC-L, which is just Unix nerd speak for count how many lines of documentation there are. So I'm going to let that run.
Patrick.
Yeah.
So this might be a good pointer there. So back on that window, like when you see that Ansible 3.1, people should ignore if they see Ansible 2.10 in there, because it looks like there's still 2.10 hanging around.
So 2.10 is actually the version of Ansible core.
Right.
I'm going to get to that in a second.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So you should ignore it in terms of, what version of Ansible am I running? But it's a great question, because you're going to see base, which is core,
right.
Show up as an older version. So what I didn't explain, and so just let me wrap this up. So there are now 5,595 modules in Ansible 3.1. So you can understand that this is a scaling problem here. So, but all your favorite modules are in there. They're going to show up as collections. And there's the blog posts that I have links to will explain, where, who moved my cheese and where it went. So what I didn't explain here is Ansible core base here in the packaging you saw is at 2.10, and you'll see it go to 2.11, and you'll see it go to 2.12, and so forth. What you'll also see is the community package go from 3.0 to 3.1, etc. And then you'll see Ansible community package go to 4.0, and the versioning will be separate. We're moving to semantic versioning now, and so what you're going to see as an end user is you're going to see 3.0 and 4.0 released in the course of 12 months. Don't quote me on this. I think they're working to a 6-month release schedule. So like major releases will come. You'll see 3.0, 4.0 this year, 5.0, 6.0 next year, et cetera, for the big package. And I'm not sure how they're going to version core right now. So attend Summit and you'll find out. So the key thing here, the important thing here is all the collections will have their own versions. They'll be updated at their own pace. The core piece will be updated at its own pace, and it will have a version that increases as it gets new functionality and fixes. And then the community package will be snapshots in time that collect the collections and the core pieces into a usable bundle, right? And so that's what you get when you do pip install Ansible, is you get the community package with all the batteries included. And I'm sure there will be the questions about that as we go along. I'll be happy to answer them if you put them into the chat. So that's, on the engine side, and I glossed over a lot of the details. Like I said, they're in the blog posts if you want more detail. But let me talk about the evolution of what, the software formerly known as Tower, as Aaron hinted to earlier. So the phrase Tower is going away in Red Hat vernacular. Just to let you all know, we're not going to refer to Tower anymore. We're going to call it Control Node. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is that people think that they buy Tower, which is not the case anymore. We sell the platform. But the other thing is that what Tower was is fundamentally changing. So, and this is, if you look at AWX, you're going to see this on the AWX side as well. Obviously, the community upstream of Tower is AWX. But that idea of the control node, right? Today is all the control plane stuff, the web UI, the API, the execution engine, all your virtual environments, all of that is living in one monolithic blob today when you install Tower or AWX. And it's proven to be just as restrictive as having engine plus all its modules were, or core plus all the modules were in the engine idea. So what's going on is you're seeing kind of a re-architecture of what was the software formerly known as Tower. So what you're going to see going forward is I left the wholly old description here. I apologize. So I'll explain what should be here, and the bullets are wrong. Ignore those. But on the left, the picture on the left kind of shows you what we're doing. So there's an overlay network coming. It's in the future. It's not going to be here too soon. But so I'll leave that for somebody to explain later. But what you're going to see that I want to talk about today is the idea of these execution nodes, right? So today, one big monolithic blob, and you have multiple of them if you want to scale out. Tomorrow, you're going to have the control plane and the web UI and API, and then you're going to have these execution nodes. And the execution nodes are going to use something we're calling execution environments, which run in containers. So this is really cool and good for the future. So let's look at that a little bit more. What are we doing with containers? Well, here's the problem. If you've ever tried to deploy your playbook beyond your own laptop, using AWX or Tower, you've run into the problem of virtual environment and dependency management hell, to use a very frank term. You have different versions of Python, you have different versions of Ansible. Some stuff works in Python 2.7, some stuff hasn't been updated to Python 3 yet, some stuff won't work in Python 2.7. Like, it just becomes a bit of a nightmare to get the right kind of dependency management. And so, from the perspective of, building my playbooks and running them on my laptop, which might be a Mac, it might be a Linux box, and, who knows what the development environment is. And then I go into something like an AWX or Tower infrastructure, and everything breaks because my virtual environment is missing a dependency. If you've been there, I've been there. So this is one of the fundamental problems we're trying to solve with the idea of virtual execution environments. So what is the execution environment? It is basically a definition, a set of definition files. What collections do I need? What Python dependencies do I need? And what system dependencies do I need? And then, and what version of Ansible do I need? Put that all together into and use the universal base image, EBI 8, which is, Red Hat makes this public for everybody to use as container base image, and then bundle it all up into a container. And so now when I run my playbooks, I have all the benefits of containers, right? I have a repeatable, reliable environment in which to run my my playbooks. And so I can use that same environment on my local development machine, and I can use it on my enterprise automation platform. And I know when I run my playbook, it's going to have all the dependencies that it needs to execute properly. And I'm not going to have to, manage virtual environments. The other thing is that if I'm a playbook developer, I can now provide my playbooks and the execution environment that it needs so that we can deploy in production. So what does that look like? That kind of looks like this, right? So I have my execution environment. I've got my my base image. I've got my Python, in this case 3.8. I've got Ansible Core 2.11. Right, and Core is going to include other things that it needs, like YAML and Jinja and so forth, and then all the collections, right? And so on the left here, I've got a sampling of collections that this particular playbook needs, right? Because I'm talking to AWS and I'm talking to Arista and so forth. So I bundle all this together, I create a container, and then I deploy it to the Ansible control nodes to execute my playbooks. So that's what that looks like. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, that sounds great, or maybe not, but I think it sounds great because it resolves that dependency management problem I mentioned earlier, but I've added complexity. Again, power, simplicity. How do we balance this out? So what you're going to see are some new components in the Ansible, if you haven't noticed them already, in the Ansible ecosystem. So there's a thing called Ansible Builder. And by the way, the real announcements for this are coming at Summit, and details will come at Summit. I'm only mentioning these, and hopefully crossing my fingers I don't get in trouble with product marketing for scooping their story, because they're public projects now, right? So the community's out there, so you can go and you can play with it. I'll tell you that Builder and Navigator are still in development. They're not completely done yet. So this is all kind of like super early alpha. Go play with it, get used to it if you want to. Ansible Builder is actually pretty good right now. You can run Ansible Builder from the command line, and it will build you a container image. It goes and it grabs your requirements files. Well, I'll show you. Again, I'm going a little off book here, but so I have a directory here, for example. I have my execution environment definition file, which you can see here. This is a really simple, straightforward one. This is the YAML file that you use to tell Ansible Builder what you want your container image to look like. There are 3 files listed in dependencies, and each one of those has a list of dependencies. So the Galaxy contains the collections I need. Python contains basically the stuff I would install with pip install, and system includes anything I need from the system level, right? Maybe I need a version of OpenSSL or something. And then any additional build steps. This is just trivialized here. And so the Ansible Builder command will take this definition file, parse it, look at all the requirements. And for example, I have my requirements.yaml here. And it includes all of the different collections that I need, right? And so when you run the Ansible Builder build command, which I would show you, but it blows up on my laptop right now because I have a problem with something else in my environment, it will build you a container image. And it will have all those dependencies and all those things that you asked for that you can then use to execute your playbooks. Well, now how do I execute my playbooks? So some people may be familiar with a thing called Ansible Runner, which is the old way, or the current, I guess really the only current way we have to run, to execute our playbooks with an execution environment. But we have a thing called Ansible Navigator that really is hot off the presses. I would say it's pre-alpha right now. But the team is working very diligently on it. So it has been published to GitHub. It is basically going to become the command line tool for running execution environments. So you'll, instead of typing Ansible-playbook, right, you'll type Ansible-navigator, run the name of your playbook, your inventory, and I'm not sure exactly how the command line will work yet. Like I said, it's super new. But basically, it will replace, I think, in most cases, the Ansible playbook command, and it will execute your playbook with the container, the execution environment, and so you'll have a reliable way of running it off the command line, executing your playbooks, and getting the job done. Now, when you move over to Tower or AWX, what you'll do is you'll take your playbook and execution environment, you'll publish them to your Git repository and your automation hub. More to come on that. And those will get ingested into AWX Tower, and they'll be executed the same way, right? So you're getting a repeatable environment to run your playbooks in. And then there's also the Ansible Platform Operator, which is the this is not, I don't know if there's a community upstream for this, actually, now that I'm staring at it. But basically, it's a way to deploy the automation platform on OpenShift. So if you're deploying in an enterprise environment and you want to deploy easily on OpenShift, there's an operator for deploying the platform going forward. So again, I'm not going to scoop anything from the summit, but if you want to know more, definitely attend Summit. So what does that look like? It looks like, here I am, I'm creating my playbooks, my execution environments, I'm running Ansible build, and it creates me the execution environment. And then as I develop my playbook, I'm going to use Ansible Navigator to execute the playbook in the execution environment off the command line. So this is the developer workflow, right? Again, trying to give you more power, but also make it simple. So if I'm a creator, at a higher level, it looks like this. So I have my custom content, my content. If I'm a Red Hat subscriber, I can get collections from redhat.com, or I can get them from Ansible Galaxy, right? And so this is where the requirements.yaml comes in. I can get my content from wherever. If I'm running in an enterprise environment, for example, and I want to make sure that everything has been approved, so I'm not running stuff out of the community that hasn't been approved, I can use this thing in the middle called Private Automation Hub, which has been out for a little while. It's similar to Galaxy, but on premise. It doesn't support roles. It's only collections. If you want roles, you have to put them in a collection. And it allows you to do some content management. I refer to it kind of like Satellite. If you're familiar with Red Hat Satellite, it's kind of like Satellite for automation content. It has Pulp. It does synchronization of repositories, both from internal or external sources. Makes them available to the automation platform, the thing formerly known as Tower. And then it executes, right? So that's kind of what the development experience would look like in an automation environment, enterprise automation environment, right? So the previous slide, this is local development work. This is deployment into a production environment. And so again, a little quick preview of what you're going to see at Summit. You're going to probably see a variation of this slide, how it all fits together. We're working on, and I think this is something you'll see in the near future, is a lot more work on the developer tool stuff. So I know there's work going on, to give you better things in Molecule and Lint, but I'm not deeply plugged into that right now. So I think it's coming in the future. But then, on the execution side and the content side, we've been really working at, like I said, separating things out, but still making it simple, and then kind of gluing those together with Navigator. So that said, this is the thing that I really wanted to get you to sign up for. This is my call to action, if you will, which is that Summit is coming. It's April 27th and 28th, plus June 15th and 16th, right? So we're breaking it into two parts because we know that, people get Zoom fatigue. The key thing is that it's zero cost again, right? So it's the virtual experience. We can't have everybody meet in person yet, but fingers crossed that we will one day in the not so distant future. But you can register for Summit. There's going to be a ton of announcements. People are going to go into detail on all the stuff I just kind of flew by here, and there will be demos and labs and everything that you would expect. Not just on Ansible, of course, but all the other Red Hat stuff. And then, kind of looking forward beyond that, again, Ansible Fest will be coming again in the fall. I don't know if it'll be virtual or in person. I'm guessing virtual, but I don't really know. So that's it for me. I don't know how much time I took up, honestly, but I hope it was worthwhile. And so, Aaron, if we want to switch back, and I don't know if there's another speaker, if we're going into questions or where we're at. So,
Patrick, thank you so much. You covered quite a bit there, and I'm sure a whole bunch of people who might be just diving into Ansible right now might be like, well, where do I start? And then a whole bunch of people who are already well invested in Ansible are like thinking, yeah, I've got technical people at my organization that'll just take care of this for me. So I'm sure it's going to raise a whole bunch of eyebrows and make a couple people mildly uncomfortable for a short period of time, but the payoff in the end, I think, is very beneficial. in the end, like, I think what we've seen a lot, at least with some of our engagements, is that a lot of this sort of dependency hell, as you described it, is a real thing. And all of that transition from Python 2 to Python 3 introduced a whole bunch of other things that nobody wanted to have to deal with, clearly. So I think there's absolutely a silver lining to what's going on with the product. So it's good to see. I'm going to bring back Aurora and Mohsin for Q&A so we can get questions and answers from everybody all at once. So hey, Aurora, Mohsin, welcome back. And so, I mean, at this point, like Patrick, if you have questions about what they talked about, microkates, and vice versa, Aurora, Mohsin, if you have questions for Patrick, feel free. And then anyone who's watching on YouTube, please drop in any questions to chat and we'll pass them up as well. And we've also got a few other questions from our team I'm going to pass through. So, all right, I guess let's just start. So right off the bat, there was one that came in earlier. So someone had mentioned, is Redis the replacement for memcached? And I think you covered that, but for everyone else, Patrick.
Yeah, so I'll briefly cover that. Right, I guess a couple of releases ago, we replaced RabbitMQ with Redis, and that had a lot to do with the message queuing that was going back and forth between nodes in the cluster. There was actually, I think there was like an hour-long YouTube video on it. While we're talking here, I'll see if I can find it, that it kind of explained why. And when it comes to caching and message queuing, it can get kind of gnarly. So I'll search for this in the background while we do the next question. I'll post it into the chat.
Okay, fair enough. And then curious, is there a replacement for the job events endpoint? Would you happen to know off the bat? There probably is, or something's going to happen with it, right?
You know what? That one is beyond my knowledge. I know that there were some changes to the way that job events were processed because it was kind of clunky and the database was a problem. And I'm not sure why the endpoint was deprecated and if there's something replacing it. I don't know the answer to that question. But,
okay, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
That's totally fine, and we believe you. We know you're not lying. Okay.
Well, I wouldn't. If I was making something up, you'd figure it out pretty quickly, I'm sure.
Absolutely, the internet knows all truth, right? Okay, so there was another one that came in. This one was for Mohsin or Aurora about the microkates thing. So we saw that you went down to 1 core and roughly 4 gigs of RAM. Like, how low can it go for a node for microkates? How small can it be?
Yeah, I know some people that are running microkates on Raspberry Pis. So, and they are like, even I have heard like less than 1 GB, but haven't tested it myself. But definitely it works for some kind of scenario where you're doing it on IoT or things like that. So yeah, it can work. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a few Raspberry Pis for labbing as well, and I think I'm going to try this out in the next week or two. Like, it's great to be able to throw Kubernetes at something and not have it consume entire, giant clusters of resources to get it done. So yeah, that's interesting. Like, down to the size of a Raspberry Pi, it's a really good form factor. And I mean, there's probably other sort of compute products out there for edge that use resources of a similar amount, and it looks like that's the answer, is the microkates thing. Another one is, this one's for Patrick. So for anyone who's currently just using Ansible Community, like, what are maybe the top 3 things that they might need to be concerned with? Like, they're going to eventually do a yum update on some system they have in a sandbox environment or a lab, and they're going to see it go from 2.9 to 3. Is there anything they really should be concerned with?
The biggest one is really the issue we've been talking about for over a year, which is that everything is moving to collections. And what that means is that the nomenclature for things is going to change, right? This is probably the biggest thing, is you're going to find that your module that you've been calling has got a new name, right? I would never recommend that you upgrade from 2.9 to 3.0 without testing it first, but that's kind of good advice. Quite frankly, I haven't upgraded to 3.0 yet because or 3.1, I guess, at this point. So for new playbook development, right, start on 3.1. Simple. That would be my advice. If you've got existing playbooks, I think you need to test them to see if your modules have been renamed, and you may have some naming to redo. There's a whole other blog post on that as well, the naming of modules. So again, I feel like I should just be pasting a ton of links into chat right now.
Yeah, but then we'd take away from some of Summit's fire. So, and then the blog posts that are going to come soon, anyways. So yeah, let's leave the fire to them. Let's not steal it all. I mean, I'm sure if we were a 100,000 attendee kind of live stream, someone would stop us before we did. But it's a good thing we're still community sized, so we can pull off stuff like this. So there was another question came in, probably a little more general. Like, is it safe? Is it fair to say that Red Hat's going to talk about the supportability of Ansible Core and community packages for the future versions of RHEL at Summit, or do you think that person should maybe just reach out to someone and ask?
So, I can talk to this a little bit. There's a lot of confusion about what was ever supported by Red Hat in terms of within RHEL, right? Officially, the only Ansible support you got from RHEL was for something we call the Linux system roles. And so this is a kind of a complicated question because obviously you can install community on RHEL. You used to be able to do a yum install of Ansible, and a lot of people thought that meant that they could use Ansible for whatever they wanted and get support for it. Unfortunately, if you tried to open a support ticket, support would point you to a nice little document on our website that explained what you got for that and what you didn't. And so unfortunately, that caused a lot of confusion. People thought they were buying RHEL and they were getting Ansible support, and unfortunately, that's actually not the case. But I don't know if that will be spoken to at Summit. I don't think so. That's really a question for your account team, because, like I said, there's a little bit of support, but it's probably not what you thought.
Fair enough. Sounds good. Another one for microcates, and I'm pretty sure you touched on this already, but for the part where you're deploying this to multiple clouds, it doesn't matter which cloud you put it in. It doesn't matter which infrastructure, right? Someone had asked that, like, does it matter where you spawn up your microcates cluster?
No, it doesn't matter. You can deploy in any kind of virtual environment or a bare metal deployment where you have like different servers running on bare metal. So it depends. For our playbook, we were just doing the SSH to those nodes. So it depends on whatever inventory you're putting in your inventory files. So it can run really on any kind of scenario, either on cloud or on bare metal, on-prem. Yeah.
Right. And we mentioned, like, you could put it on a Raspberry Pi if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Fair game. Yeah. So that's good. I mean, and there's probably some minimums and maximums, but I think if you're going to start labbing this thing just for everyone else, just get a look at the documentation, and Mohsin, afterwards we can see if we can put any of our code into our community repo for other people to see, because that might be useful for others who are just diving into microcates from any facet.
Yeah, definitely. We can share the playbook code on the Arctiq GitHub repository.
Okay, that's good. And so this is probably pointed at Ansible. Is there any new reporting available for the Ansible automation platform?
I'm going to be honest, right? Reporting is not something that's got a huge focus. We're more about focusing on the automation itself. And what I normally see with respect to reporting is folks will export data from Ansible to something else, whether that be Splunk or whether that be an elk stack, or whether that be some other tool to actually do the reporting, right? For Red Hat to build a reporting engine, if you would, probably not the most optimum use of our time, considering we're trying to balance the simplicity and power of the automation side. So I think it's just not enough hours of the day, not enough resources. So, there's other tools out there that are fantastic with respect to reporting, and we just say, take the Ansible stuff and send it to them.
Yeah, like one of the ones that comes to mind is ARA reporting Ansible, and then not for reporting, but also for testing. There's Molecule, and some of those things they should still work effectively with Ansible's engine core. I'm now at a loss of which one to call it, but eventually that'll flatten out. But I'm sure a lot of the tooling that everyone already uses with Ansible will still apply, because in the end, it's doing the same task from the control machine to its minions, right? So,
yeah, and we, when it comes to the reporting side, we often see folks that want to report on different KPIs and metrics, right? And if you're using something like Tableau, or like I said, you've got other tools, and we just recommend you feed those tools with the data you get from Ansible.
Yeah. Something else that's been, I think, is good about this is that it's going to make a far more optimized and consistent experience for everyone who's choosing to put what I'm still going to call Tower for another couple of weeks into their Kubernetes clusters, and that's because it's becoming common, because it makes it easier to update and keep it, make it high available. There's so much more that you have to gain by putting it into your OpenShift or your cloud Kubernetes, whatever happens to be, right? So I think it's a good move, because something we do pretty routinely is add things to the Ansible control machine image and then redeploy it. Now it looks like that's kind of built into the workflow, which is absolutely a benefit for our sanity. So
yeah, and if you don't mind, I have a couple of things to add to that. The first is that Ansible will continue to work on virtual machines, right, through Podman, as well as through OpenShift, right? So it's not like we're getting rid of the virtual machine because we're building these execution environments. So that's good. I agree on the whole. If you've got an OpenShift cluster, Kubernetes cluster, and you want to run, Ansible in that definitely helps with scaling, right? Like I showed you, there's operators and stuff for the supported platform. The other thing I wanted to add is one of the things that we're seeing a ton of interest in is on the, I don't know if you're familiar with Red Hat ACM, the cluster manager, the idea of using Ansible as an adjunct to Kubernetes automation, right? Kubernetes OpenShift automation to deploy your application, and then how do I configure my firewall and my load balancer and all those other things, right? And so tying the two together gets you kind of that end-to-end automation. So we're seeing a ton of interest in that too, since you mentioned the Kubernetes stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the new entryway into automation is going to be, like, I think it's absolutely going to be focused on writing Ansible operators for in your Kubernetes clusters, right? And it doesn't have to be OpenShift. You can put operators onto any K8s and have your operator handle things for your applications in your Kubernetes cluster. It doesn't have to be written in Go anymore. Right. So all of a sudden, people who know how to write Ansible, it's a great story. There's a few more things you need to consider and take care of, but such as the territory with K8s, it's not the simplicity machine everyone thinks it might be. But
there's two folks who have a lot of great resources on those topics, right? One of them, of course, is Jeff Geerling, who everybody should know if they're in the Ansible community.
For sure.
And the other is Tim Apnell, who's well known as well, and he's got a lot to say about that integration and operators. So if you're looking for information out there and you want to know more about that, those two, search for their blog posts.
And even though it sounds like we pre-planned that, but I'm going to throw it in anyway, because we definitely did not pre-plan that. A little spike to Jeff Geerling. He was on our last Ansible meetup where he talked about using Ansible in a whole different way and a number of other things. And he talked about his YouTube channel too. But if anyone's watching the stream and is curious about what we talked about, just look at the Arctiq YouTube channel, and we have that meetup still there as a video to watch. So for Aurora and Mohsin, Patrick, do you guys have any questions amongst each of yourselves there? Do you want anyone to hear?
Not that I can think of. Sorry.
No? It's interesting because Mohsin was using Ansible to run snap commands, and snap is not as common or regular in the rel sort of universe. And at the same time, we have the ability now to put microcates on rel boxes just as well, right? Like there's so much intermixing of ecosystems here. Oh my goodness, it's fantastic.
The power of open, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mohsin, did you have something?
No, I was just saying I'm good for now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. So I think we'll wrap that up for Q&A. There's nothing else coming in from YouTube chat, but as usual, here's our the ways to get in touch with us. Of course, Ansible.com is because that's why we're here. But if you're interested in any of the code that Arctiq works on that happens to be public, it's in our GitHub. Visit our website. And then what Patrick was mentioning about Red Hat and blogs, you can reach by either reaching out to us, leave comments into the video, and we can probably get links out to you. But we'll find a way to get those available in case you're really curious right now and cannot wait for Summit. But other than that, keep automating all the things. And that looks like that's a wrap. All right. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for joining us, and feel free to say goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone.